While the summer is winding down, fall is really amping up. I am still doing some work in the garden that may seem kind of out of season, and I'm gonna be transplanting some different things still. You know, I am someone that if the weather cooperates, I find it is best to kind of go more with the weather than always with the calendar. So while we are going into fall, I am in the middle of still doing some projects of moving a few boxwood that need to be moved. I'm gonna show you why. I'm replacing a few behind me in this parterre area I have, where sometimes after, they've been in probably about 10 years now, maybe 11. Sometimes after that long, a few maybe got mismanaged or just aren't looking the best. I have some I need to transplant for a project next year. It's a great time to do it. We're gonna go over that. I'm also going to go put a couple pumpkins in some urns over at Mom's, but that means that I'm gonna be taking out some agave and really am going to make sure that I have them properly stored for the winter. And I'm gonna show you all the ways that I do that. With any of the plants, I do the same process. So where we're gonna be working to start is right here in this area. You can see I have 4 quadrants really of these boxwood that I do keep trimmed into more of a nice hedge and shape, but a few of them I wanna kind of show you. I think it's because we came off a couple really dry drought years. And you can see every so often I have found a couple that if you kind of break apart and look at just like that individual plant, is not looking good. So I happen to have, if we go look for over here, the pineapple sage, by the way, is just now in bloom. It's beautiful, hummingbirds love it. But if we come over here, oh, I have a fig here too. Probably the last one of the season. It looks ripe and ready to eat. If we come over here, this area that I extended with the path, it used to have 2 plantings here. Obviously, I always knew I was gonna take those out because if I twist around, they were gonna just kind of come into the path, and that wasn't what I wanted. Next year, I'm gonna make a bed all along on each side. I have some different thoughts on what that's gonna be, but these boxwood over here, I've already moved any of the ones from here that I wanted to. The boxwood over here though, there's still a few really nice ones in here, and I wanna make sure I can transplant them or use them where I would want to. And right there where I was looking is a great spot, like right here on the end. This one is so beautiful, and I wanna make sure I can really save it because there's no point in throwing anything out if it has good use. Boxwood thankfully have fairly shallow root systems, so I can get into this area fairly easy. What you always want to make sure is you know where you're digging. I have no lines or anything underground back here, but I also do have drip line, and I made sure I saw where that was so I don't puncture it. Not that that can't be fixed, but it's best to know if you can all those things before you go and just dig and not exactly know what you're gonna hit. So what I'm doing with this one, since this is the one that's bad, I'm not worrying how I take it out. I'm just going to go in, make cuts all around it, and then just be able to get it out because this one is gonna be discarded. And you can see here, it doesn't take too much work to get it out. And then I like to shake off as much of that soil as I can because I like my soil. I want it to stay here, but I always think it's amazing. So this is, like I said, 10, 11 years old. Take off the soil, and then look, boxwood really don't have the biggest root system. They can be fairly small, really, when you look at the size of it. And they're pretty easy. What I like about them, they're pretty easy to transplant, and they're pretty easy to manage and move around. What I like to do is make sure I have the hole mostly dug before I go dig up my new one. So I did take out quite a bit here, knowing approximately about what size I'll be able to dig the other one out at. You can see here was my drip line that I knew where it was. Nothing underneath, thankfully. That I knew too. And now I'm gonna be able just to, what's nice when you're transplanting something you have, instead of just trying to throw it away or discard, is that I'm able to put in somewhat the same size as what's here. Now I gave these a trim, I think in June. And I really could have trimmed them one more time in August, but I don't like to trim anymore here in the fall because it could, if it sprouts too much growth, really die back over the winter. So let's go grab the other shrub and then see where our hole stands for size. So you can see it really wasn't that hard to get up, and it's not that big a root system. Now, sometimes when you're moving a big tree, or maybe a semi-established tree, you want to get out as far as you can, get big roots. I think boxwood are kind of the great exception to that. Same with arborvitae usually too. They have a little bit more of a shallow root system that's pretty easy to move. So what I first do is check my hole. So since I can easily maneuver this, I can set it down that hole, and I'm pretty much spot on. It's actually a little low. I never want to plant anything obviously below where it's currently growing. That's just because that can really suffocate it. The thing is, if anything, plant it slightly high. If you see a grub, pull them out. If you plant it slightly high, you have to know this displaced soil that's loose is going to compact a little bit and settle over time, which will lower the plant. So always plant it a little higher than you think. Now, just like if I was going to plant any other time, I'm going to use biotone. So Espoma biotone is great for roots any time of the year when you're planting them. Helps them acclimate, helps them work in. And these roots are really going to be active into December here, if not later. With that biotone in the hole, you do notice I'm not going to fertilize it. I don't fertilize anything with like plant tone or anything in the fall. I'll do all of that in the spring. But now I can place this instantly. Look how beautiful it looks. So now that I have it at the right level, I do like to water it really well before I put all that soil back in around it. This just makes sure that water is getting to those roots. We're taxing the roots, we're stressing them slightly. So we want to make sure we get good moisture to them. And then I'm going to treat this like a newly planted plant or shrub all throughout the rest of the growing season until it would go dormant. So that could be well into December for me until the ground gets cold. So you can see it really isn't that much work, and fall is a great time to transplant certain things. While late winter, early spring is the best time, we still sometimes do things when we have to. And knowing I want to start on that project early next year, I want those boxwood moved. So it's a great time to do that. Now you can see I have 2 beautiful boxwood. A hedge is actually really easy. These are all planted on about, 18 or 24 inch centers, meaning that's how far it is between one green velvet boxwood and the next. Then over time, they grow into each other. So around the corner here, you see there is a gap. That gap in between those boxwood is where the drip line comes up into the bed. I don't want to plant something directly there just for one to disturb the line. I don't want to ever have to hit it if I try to dig something up. So those 2 boxwood will grow into each other in the next year or 2, no big deal. And then I'll just trim them into a nice hedge on their own. So it's really easy. So now just keeping them watered is all we're going to take. Now I'm going to run over to Mom's. We're going to take some plants out for winter to get them ready, but also put pumpkins in. On the east side of where I call the east lawn here at Mom's, there are 3 repeating beds going down to the orchard where there's 2 columns. And in each bed I have an antique urn, and I have a large agave in each one that I save every year. I'm sure you've seen me plant these before, it's old news. But every year I have to bring these in. Iowa is not winter friendly to beautiful agave plants. While they can take quite a bit of cold, they can't take that below freezing. So really what I have to do is just dig them up every year. And so usually to start doing that, my best tool is just a big, beautiful stainless steel knife. And so this one I use, it has a slight serration to it. I got this, I think, from A.M. Leonard, the online supply store. And what I like about it is it's sharp enough that it can cut through roots. I also sometimes use this to cut through certain big pumpkin stems when needed. It's actually very handy to have these out in the yard. But what I will go in and do is you have to be careful. You can see I'm wearing gloves. They poke. Agave are somewhat, pokey, so you have to be a little careful. Now around this I had some beautiful Heliochrysum planted, the silver mist Heliochrysum, and then some succulents. The succulents I'm going to save. The Heliochrysum I let go just because it doesn't overwinter well. But what I do is I try to go in and just with my knife cut through those roots, and honestly within even just a few months every year, it is amazing the beautiful roots that really start. Now these urns, I should say, as you just noticed, are in 3 pieces, so it's not abnormal that you can move the urn as you're going. Now sometimes also what I will do is clean up and cut through a couple of the leaves that look bad, because it's just a good time to do that. So I go around and keep cutting, trying to bend up the leaves as I can. You can see already what I'm starting to do is lift this agave out of here. So that's what that knife does. And yeah, you cut through the roots, but what this does is control the growth too, and the size. So really the same process happens for any plant that I keep. A lot of them, when I put them in other containers that I don't bring in, this is how I place them in something else. Now the containers that I can move around easily, smaller terracotta containers, those go indoors to a plant room obviously. But these I have to pot up. So I just keep black nursery pots from trees, from shrubs, because sometimes you have to size up year to year as things do get bigger. And then I just always use my Espoma all-purpose potting mix in any of them that I plant. So this is a general mix. Now, a lot of people are always worried, like, Well, it's not necessarily geared towards cactus, agave. They do have a cactus mix. I love it. I find for cost-effective reasons, all-purpose soil for overwintering really is best. I manage the watering. Most of these really, to me, go dormant in that they don't need to be watered a lot. They stay cool over the winter. So what I do is just put a little soil in, just enough on the bottom, depending what my root size is. Then I bring in the agave or whatever plant it is. So as I'm bringing this over, you see how big it is, and I'm gonna have to still size it up a little bit here. But right here you see this little growth, that's a pup. So I can pull this off, and this I could actually pot up, and I would have a whole nother agave. Sometimes you get bigger pups, sometimes smaller. I'm gonna shave a little bit more off around all the sides so it fits in this container. So I want you to see now how small I make that root ball. It's pretty small compared to the plant itself, but this is what allows me to be able to manage them every year. Now, this leaf right here, it's bad. This is one I will cut off. As they open up, you can remove the bad ones. But then what I do is just fill in, and really I'm potting like any other plant. I'm filling in with soil now around it, and it's ready to go. So I have soil now all around it. So I do this usually a few weeks before I have to put it indoors before we get too cold. Usually it's mid-October when we're gonna have a hard freeze, because I want it to get acclimated to this container outdoors if it can, when it has sun, when it has some heat. But the one thing I do always is worry about bugs, right? Now my agave go into a room that stays more between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit, minimal light, because they somewhat go dormant. They don't search for the light, they stay beautiful. But both for them and the plants I do on the warm side where I keep between 70, 75 degrees Fahrenheit, I like to prepare them and try to get any bugs off, which for me, it's not a bad spray. It's just usually all seasons horticultural oil. So unlike traditional horticultural oil that's called dormant oil, this is all seasons. You can use this no matter the season. And this is great for scale, this is great for mealy bugs, spider mites, all those things. And it really just coats the plant in a nice kind of thin oil. And this is something I will use not only through the summer, I use it through the winter, where I will just use it on, my citrus is a big one that I'm gonna try to do better at this year, where I'm gonna spray it multiple times because I get scale on things really bad. And last year I did fight spider mites pretty bad too. And I was not doing a good job at keeping up on this. So I'm gonna try to do very well at doing this to everything before I bring it in, not just the things I think need it. That was my one issue. Because last year my staghorn ferns were really bad. I'm gonna do this to everything once it's potted up, and then again before I put it in the room. So this is just my first round of treatment. So I'm now able to place my pumpkin, which is exciting. Now, for the succulent that was in here, by the way, I did have it saved. I will pot this up separately. There's another one too. These are string of dolphins, I believe. Aren't they cute? They look like little dolphins, just kind of flying away. I'm gonna pot this up separately. I kind of forgot about it, so I didn't bring a pot. But we can place the pumpkin in the meantime, right? I don't do extensive decorating, but Mom does like a little something. And so always over here, what I do is fit this with, of course, a grapevine. And that's just to clean up the container, right? To give it a little bit of something. But sometimes what I'm placing in here is still too small that it would fall in. So I use a smaller grapevine. So I think I have like an 18-inch and then probably a 12-inch. That makes it overall smaller. And then I can place on just one nice kind of Kentucky field pumpkin. And it just sits here all fall long. Now, I've never had one of these rot on me. They're picked at the correct time where they're drying off when they're picked. And I make sure then, and they sit here usually until we get too cold. So once you start having hard freezes, if these freeze, then they're gonna rot. But it's just kind of nice to see them lining up all the way down. So I have a few more to do, and then we're gonna be done. Now you can see going down, you just get these orange pops all the way down. I did have to steal the grapevine wreath, the smaller one, from these two to put in those 2 urns there in the back. But you know, it's just kind of a fun thing that's really simple and very, you know, if you grow them, obviously economical. Otherwise, locally, I think these pumpkins I saw somewhere being sold for like $6.99. You know, that's not a lot if you just want to do a couple pots and put something in it that you don't have to water, and can kind of just keep and give you a little bit of that fall flair. You know, I love to enjoy the seasons. I love to experience each season, and part of that is being able to put something out that just kind of makes it feel like the season. When you drive in, it just greets you and makes you happy. So we moved some boxwood today. I have to remind myself what I did. We moved some boxwood and transplanted them in the fall. Still a great time to do that. Same if you're planting new. And I got some of my plants ready for winter storage, sprayed them with the all seasons oil, which is going to really help. And I'm going to do that on all the things that I'm bringing in, horticultural oil, all seasons on all of it, which will really help hopefully start the year off good when they go into storage. So here, usually I say mid-October, I watch the weather, bring them in when I have to. And I'm gonna just set the agave on the outside of the room here for a while. It's a full cart here right now, those 3 large agave, 2 smaller ones that I'll be doing, but it all gets the ball rolling. And my thing is like, once I get started, I'm like, okay, I can do this. It's any garden task. It feels maybe sometimes monumental to start, but then once we get going, it's all good. So I hope you're having a beautiful fall. I hope you're able to start getting some of your winter work done before we go into hibernation mode. If you're like me in a cold state in the winter, we hibernate in the winter, and that's what keeps us all rejuvenated for the next. So enjoy, I'm gonna keep working.